introduction. And hello, amazing bakers and aspiring bakers. We're so happy to see you here with us. I am one of the pastry chef instructors here at the Auguste Escoffier School of Culinary Arts. And I have the absolute pleasure of currently teaching the cake decorating section, which is actually one of the last classes that we have here in our program. I've also taught many of the beginner classes as well. So sometimes I have the privilege of seeing you in the beginning of your education and then again at the end. So before we go any further, please take out your cell phones, hit the Instagram, and search Chef Steve Konopelski and hit follow.
That's
Shameless
right.
plug. Please, if you would love to check out my YouTube, The Sweet Life of Steve. Anyway, that's enough shameless production there. So today we are making a fantastic little fun Valentine's treat. And one of the reasons that I want to share with you today is it actually features two recipes that we use in our beginning pastry class, two various types of cookies. Then this recipe also features some cake and a Swiss meringue buttercream that we make in our final class, the cakes class in our program. So you're kind of seeing stuff a little bit from the beginning and a little bit from the end. Now, one of the reasons that this is also a really great recipe is it's sort of a little bit of reduce, reuse, recycle. So it's very rare in the bakery that we actually bake cake fresh to become cake pops, but rather it is the scraps from when we're trimming our cakes that we're going to decorate. We need to do something with those scraps. If we don't, that is food loss, and that is money that is wasted. So, as in true pastry fashion, we take our scraps and we turn them into something new. And so that's kind of really where the cake pop was born. And depending on how you name it, might see them all as cake pops. You may see them as cake truffles, which is what we call them in our bakery. A rose by any other name would still smell as sweet. Learning how to name your things is just one of the many things that we teach you here in our education classes that also go along with your technique classes. So you'll learn things like food costing, menu design and preparation, entrepreneurship, etc. So let's go ahead and we're going to go to my dear friend Joe at Chopper 16 in the sky, and let's kind of start seeing what we can create today. We have a whole bunch of kind of various little specialized tools that I am going to use, and they're all kind of really very, basic in regards. This is a stencil. Now, these are specially designed for cookies, but you can actually find something very similar to this in the paint section of your local big box craft store. Any sort of plastic stencil will work. It is food safe because they can be washed and sanitized. So I have a stencil here that I'm using for one of my designs. And then I have another stencil. I'm actually going to use this little heart right here for another thing that we're doing. This is what I'm using for our Tuile cookie. Now, please put it in the chat. Has anyone heard of a Tuile, spelled T-U-I-L-E? Don't be shy. Don't be shy. Yes. Well, I see some previous students in here that have snuck into this, that have heard of Tuile. So Tuile is a very, very thin European style cookie. And it starts out with a batter that is really more like a paste-like consistency. It's essentially by weight equal parts of egg whites, flour, butter, and sugar. It can be flavored in any number of ways, and it also can be piped. But one of the things that we do a lot with this is we will sort of, use a stencil. So I take this paste while it's nice and cool, and I can actually just sort of gently smear it using my stencil. Tuiles are very, very sort of paper thin. They bake up incredibly fast. They're delicious. And now I simply just sort of move my stencil away. And now we have our fun little, shape. And of course, you can do many, 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 many rounds of this. We get them cold once more and then bake them off. And when we're done, they look like this. And you can see how paper thin that cookie is. It's very, very crispy. It's evenly golden brown all the way. you can use things like parchment paper and stuff like that. But one of the benefits of silicone is it is heat conductive. So it actually allows the bottom of the cookie to start to caramelize and gives us that nice kind of crunch. So silicone, if you are a big cookie baker, is actually a really, really great investment. You can find them in all sorts of, you know, the websites and this, that, and whatever. So that becomes that. Look at that. So it's crispy, crunchy, and it's delicious. So that is one of the things that we start doing to make this recipe. We make a whole bunch of these sort of fun little tuiles. Now, another recipe that we have that we've shared with you is our sugar cookie recipe that we also make in PA 103. So I've gone ahead and taken the liberty of making a bunch of heart-shaped sugar cookies. You can see they're really nicely baked all the way through, relatively thin. I personally love a big, fat, thick sugar cookie, but they don't get as crunchy. And we actually need these to be a little bit crispier for our use for our little love bug cake pop. Once my cookie is cooled completely, you see that it's got like this very sort of shiny coat on it, right? And you might be saying to yourself, self, because of course that's what you would say to yourself. You would say to yourself, self, what is that? So there's a couple of different things that you can do. You can do a very, very sort of thin, almost like coating of flood icing, if you will. And then take a little bit of a luster dust or petal dust. In this case, I use luster because it's shiny. Mix it with a tiny little splash of vodka. And then you create this very, very sort of thin layer of paint. So that's exactly what I did. I just painted these with a little bit of petal shimmer dust with a little vodka and let it dry. And now we have this sort of fun, sort of super sheen shine. Isn't that great? To this, I want to add some texture. Now, of course, cake decorating is really just playing. You understand the techniques, but afterwards, it's kind of just like playing around. And that's one of the things that I love the most about this is we have this sort of like very scientific thing, which is the bake. And then we have the artistic thing, which is the decoration. So I'm actually going to use my little stencil here. And we're actually going to go to a different camera. And I'm going to show you what we're going to do with this. I've made a royal icing, which you also have in the recipe that we sent to you. This royal icing recipe is used again in PA 105, our first class. A couple of things that you can do. Here's another couple little tricks of the trade. If you are going to do white, it's a good idea to actually add a little bit. Believe it or not, they make white food coloring. And you can add a tiny little splash to that. And it's going to make your whites brighter, kind of like bleach is in the laundry. So I have some royal icing that's at a fairly thick consistency. You can kind of see down in there. Let's go ahead and go to our representative on the ground crew. And you can see I've got my stencil. And then here is my cookie. I'm going to lay my stencil on top of my cookie, and using an offset spatula, I'll just take a little bit of my royal icing. And basically what we're going to do is just sort of gently smear this across the top of my cookie. You don't want your royal icing to be too thick. You want it to be at a nice spreadable consistency, but you don't want it to be so thin that it's not holding its shape. So this is just ever so slightly thinner than pipeable consistency, but not as thin as flood icing for sure. And I just take a little bit more in here and do a very sort of gentle spread all the way across. And then I lift up my stencil and ta-da! Very quickly have this really sort of fun, cool design. Now it's sort of little monochromatic. So that's one of my kind of design aesthetics is white on white. But we've added depth by making the bottom part shiny. So oftentimes when you are doing decorating, you have to kind of consider what is the finished product going to look like and what are the steps that I need to take in order to get that result, AKA your mise en place, something that we talk about a lot here at school. So now once my royal icing dries, which will actually dry kind of relatively quickly, I want to add a little bit more embellishment. So I have a paper cornet that I have filled with some red royal icing. Another little trick of mine is whenever you're making color, to layer colors. So I have a red here, but I've actually used 2 different shades of red. Whoops. In order to get that. Now, you don't have to go buy these, but of course I have a massive collection of these. So I have basically like a deeper red and then a lighter red. And when you combine 2 different shades, it gives you a truer version of that color. Sometimes you also want to have a little bit of underlight. So for example, if you're looking for a deeper red, put a tiny little bit of brown in there. If you're looking for a brighter yellow, you can always throw just the hintest of orange. So you should always be layering color. Get my... We use paper cornets a lot in the industry. We rarely, if ever, use piping bags. Paper cornets are something that are very, very easy to make. They're a really, really great way of delivering product very quickly. We can kind of fix the edges if we need to. So I'm going to do a little bit of like a bead border here. So I'm coming in at the side and just give a gentle little squeeze, pull back. Are you able to see that? Yes, okay. I'm going to switch to the chopper in the sky so you can kind of get a little bit more of an overhead view. We do learn how to make paper cornets in class, and we use them a lot. In fact, when I had my bakery, it was one of the very first things that any intern had to do when they came to work for me, is they would get handed a big stack of papers, and then they would make a bunch of paper cornets. So you see, I'm kind of doing a few at a time. I move my cookie, and then I keep going. This is very, very small, delicate, sort of tedious work. And we go all the way around the cookie. And eventually, they look like this. So now I've added a little bit of embellishment. I have this really, really nice sort of little teensy, tiny little design all the way around. Something that I like to call micro piping because it's so, so incredibly small. And you can really only achieve that with a paper cornet. If you're using a like metal piping tips, they clog up so, so fast. Now, another thing that I can do is that same sort of principle on my little cookies. And that's actually what I've done to create the wings for this. So this is a technique that's called Cornelli lace. And basically it looks like a whole bunch of squiggles. But in one fluid motion, you make these sort of nonsensical squiggles with your piping tip, attempting and trying very hard to make sure that none of them actually touch each other. And you continue around and around and around and around. And that's what I did to make my wings for my cute little love bug. So I did a Cornelli lace on one side, let it dry completely. And then I actually did a Cornelli lace on the other side. So this is all super fun little stuff you can do with royal icing. Kind of once you understand the technique, the basic piping technique, the sky is sort of the limit. You can kind of do whatever it is you like. Now it's time to make our little cake pop, shall we? So another recipe that we included for you is a butter cake. This is a delicious, delicious cake. It's very rich, it's very buttery, it's very vanilla forward. We love it here at school. And what I've done is I've taken some of the scraps from that and I've put them into the bowl of a stand mixer and paddled them until they're about the consistency of breadcrumbs. And then I've taken some of my Swiss meringue buttercream, which is delicious. And I've added little bits of it at a time to the cake crumbs and mix it until they are at sort of a very nice kind of solid consistency. So we never really bake cake pops as just cake. This is a combination of cake and buttercream, and you can sort of adjust the ratio to your taste preference. But what you really want to make sure is that it is sort of solid. Now, these have been sitting in the refrigerator for a while, but they're at room temperature right now. You can see I'm kind of like pressing my hand quite firmly. I really have to kind of be a little bit more aggressive with it before it will break up. But I have this really, really nice sort of moist, decadent consistency. When I had my bakery, we would actually take these a little bit further to the point where it was almost like a paste. And that's why we referred to them as cake truffles. It also sounded fancier, and then we could charge more money. And that's never a bad thing. So I'm taking one of my finished little cookies, and I'm going to turn it so that, you know, the arrow is at the back. And with a bit of royal icing, just a little drop, I'm going to kind of put it not quite in the middle, and then take one of my cake pops and kind of rest it right on top, just like that. Now I've got a piping bag. You can kind of see them hanging out in the back, waiting for their moment to shine. I've got a piping bag that is attached with a grass tip. And this is how we make our little fur. So I just simply need to kind of come around here. Well, hopefully I can. It would appear that my grass tip is a little dried up. This is embarrassing. So my royal icing has actually seized up in my grass tip, and I don't have any other tips with me here. So necessity is the mother of invention. Here we go. I'm going to take my paper cornet and kind of drizzle all around here, just like this, making my sort of little fur type of situation for my little love bug here. And I just kind of keep going around and around and around until he is all, or she, or they are all completely covered up. Of course, with the grass tip, it's, you know, a lot easier. But hey, this is something that this actually happens a lot in competition. It's just when you think you have got everything sort of figured out, Murphy's Law goes, oh, really? Really? You think you got this? Well, I'm going to make the oven blow up right now. Or, oh, I'm going to suddenly make you lose all of those little things that you've been working so hard on. Get this kind of back here towards the center. All right, so we just kind of zippity zip, zip, zip around here, giving our little love bugs some furs. And of course, you could kind of use any color. With it being Valentine's Day, it seemed quite appropriate to stick with the hallmark colors of reds and whites. Pinks, blacks, any of those kinds of things would work really well. You can use any flavor of cake you wish, really, for the cake pop itself. I saw in the chat earlier that we have some fans of the red velvet cake, of devil's food cake. Any cake crumbs will work. Funfetti is always a lot of fun because then there's kind of those cutesy patootsy little sprinkles on the inside. And there we go. Our little guy is all covered up. I'm going to have a couple little candy eyes that we want to just place ever so not on the same. I have learned
watching a demo.
Yeah, I've learned that if you want something to look more realistic, then never put things on the same plane. So especially for little critters, we kind of exaggerate a little bit. And then I can kind of come in here afterwards with some extra stuff to make these fun, cute little eyebrows. Always do eyebrows, everybody, whenever you're doing eyes. It really makes them look that much more realistic. Then it's not just kind of, because, you know, your eyes are sort of offset, or they're set back into your head. So you need to sort of bring some of the frosting around so that it creates the illusion that they're not kind of set there. And then I take my little wings, my little Tuile wings, and I just kind of stab them right on in to my little cake pop, just like that. And if we need to, we can kind of attach it with a little bit more icing. And then, in just a matter of a couple minutes, everybody is ready to see all of their friends. Yay! So cute, right? So you can see how paper thin our tuiles are. They've been supported and strengthened a little bit because of the royal icing. So as the royal icing dried, it really kind of made them sort of a little bit more like rock hard. Tuiles by nature kind of soften up when they're exposed to the humidity, but because of the royal icing, they don't. So actually, I've been keeping these guys in the fridge for an entire day and nothing has happened to them. So it's kind of one of those things that isn't it sort of magical when you understand how food chemistry works and you can manipulate it to your advantage to go, oh, okay, normally this cookie would soften up, but by using something that stays rock hard, even in a humid environment, AKA the royal icing, then I've gone ahead and I have protected that. Aren't these so much fun? How much fun would this be for your little Valentine's table to make it for your sweethearts? And you basically got 4 recipes in one. It's a sugar cookie, another kind of cookie, a cake pop, and then some buttercream.